Welcome back to the Cage Rage podcast. This is Devin. Joining me once again, like always, is Miguel Iterati. And over the weekend, we had a busy weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. On Friday night, the Professional Fighter League kicked off their first round of their playoffs. And, the most notable win on the card was Kayla Harrison and Oliver Hype. She continues her rise to stardom. Really been the breakout talent in the Professional Fighters League this year. Bellator was over in Italy. Notorious veteran names like Melvin Manoff and Alessio Sakara pull off couple big wins over there for Bellator. One championship was over there with their Century Show, Part 1 and Part 2. Names like Bibiano Fernandez, Shinya Aoki, Ong Lei Zhang, and others pick up big wins, defending titles. And as well as Angela Lee in the main event of the Part 1. But no bigger name than Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson capping off the Flyweight Grand Prix over there in Asia, 4-1 championship, competed this weekend, 4-1. And we're going to talk for a brief moment before we go into covering UFC Tampa, which was the biggest news of the weekend, about the legacy and about the greatness of Mighty Mouse Johnson. Mighty Mouse Johnson, not even a year ago, big trade with the UFC and won. Mighty Mouse Johnson goes to Asia. Ben Askren comes home to the States to fight in the UFC. Mighty Mouse Johnson, the longest reigning champion in UFC history, most title defenses, one of the most dominant champions, but also one of the most overlooked and underappreciated, undervalued competitors we've ever seen. Where does he rank, Miguel? What do we have to say about Demetrius Johnson? He goes over there, he does what we all expected. He goes in there, he wins the Grand Prix. He's the champion of one now. He's the top dog. We all knew that. He's never dropped out of the top 5 pound for pound categories. It's just people have really just kind of forgotten about him here in the States because he's no longer competing in the States. He's over in Asia. My only criticism, because I knew that Mighty Mouse would do this. I knew that I don't see any competitor for him over there right now. The only thing that I feel bad about feeling, I guess, about him going to one, because he's clearly happy and he's making good moves, is I want to see him in a trilogy fight with Henry Cejudo. I want to see him back in the UFC. But still, I don't want that feeling to discredit what he's doing. He's doing great things, and now he's a champion of one. Let's shine some light. Let's talk some love about Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, Miguel.
Well, he went over there and got the job done, and my hat's off to the opponent. He put up a good fight, and I think it flashed a little bit of what we had talked about, in the previews podcast, and that one, at the lower weight classes has some talent. I think that's the essential question. Here's the thing is, it doesn't do fighters any good when, people like Dana White, and in boxing it happens too, so it's not just Dana's fault. But in boxing, I had a former world champion, in the post-Floyd Mayweather Jr. era, when I asked him who the number 1 pound for pound guy, he said, this guy, that guy, whatever. And when I said, what about Chocolatito? He himself told me, nah, he's too small. And, that's just a good example of, in boxing, the lower weight classes were not taken into account. Chocolatito sort of broke through that, but now, after he, spent a couple years at the top and came down, there's an open question as to what, how fast we'll see another small athlete take over the world rankings pound for pound. The same thing applies to Demetrius Johnson. When Dana White doesn't give the weight class respect, doesn't bring in, the full gamut of opponents, a fully flushed out roster, disrespects him, in fact, is willing to trade him, just goes to show how much they didn't really put a lot into that. It doesn't help the weight class, I would market it different. It does have to be marketed different. There are a few, the sentiment of the boxing world champion of Dana White is the sentiment of a lot of fans out there too, But there's also a lot of fans out there that say, I don't really care about women's fighting, So I think DJ's always, as a smaller fighter, going to be subject to a little bit of a stigma. I don't think it's fair. I think he's probably, the smaller weight classes, they're far and away the more technical and more fighters, especially when they're in their prime, where you're more likely to see a wide range of techniques, when was the last time you saw heavyweights, do anything like a triangle or an arm bar, even perhaps at its most rudimentary, but I like the little guys fighting, and Demetrius is an excellent example of that. And I think, in one, he's got the right spot because they'll be able to bring up a myriad, they market it correctly. They'll bring him up a myriad of opponents until he ages, and hands the torch over.
Do you think the reason that he's didn't get the kind of push and the kind of publicity in the States was because of the size? Or I have two other potential possibilities I want you to break down a little bit. Is number one, they didn't push him because of the pay-per-view numbers, that he just wasn't drawing. He didn't catch fire, that people weren't interested. Or do you think that he was a victim of the dominance factor, that when you're just too dominant, people don't care, that he didn't have that right foil, he didn't have that right foe to complement him during his title run until a Cejudo that won a very narrow decision in their rematch, and then he walks away from the company. Do you think that is what out of those three factors, just their size, being small humans in general, not pulling in the pay-per-view revenue, or just the fact that he was just so dominant and there was just very little name value in that weight class for him to compete against? Or do you think it was a combination of all three, or do you think one specific factor sticks out more than the others?
I think it's a combination of all three. I think, the bottom line is a couple of them are tied together, not having the right foil or not having the right opponent, the dominance and stuff, definitely play a part, up to a certain extent. But the fact is, the pay-per-view numbers, how much do you blame the athlete? How much do you blame the UFC's media machine and the fact that they maybe didn't put it behind him, And maybe they didn't put it behind him because he was of his size. So that all gets tied together. You know what I mean? The bottom line is in a normal UFC presentation, you got, choose any guy, Frank Mir, Colby Covington, they're all making muscles on the scale. And there's a couple of, ring card girls behind them. Now, you start getting into the smaller weight classes, and definitely by DJ's size, and DJ comes out, and DJ stands on the scale, gives you a couple of inches and stuff, and the girls who are in high heels are still way taller than him. That's a perception thing that the UFC has to be kind of clever and either find smaller models or not use models for that type of presentation, not highlight models, not put the fighters in situations like that where people are going to be like, wow, they're really small, Leave that, in a high HD world where they can put cameras in everybody's face and stuff like that. They could make him seem larger than life if they wanted to. They just never chose to do that. And again, like I said, it looks foolish him holding the belt and have two towering models, over him. It just, there are going to be portions of the population that are like, yeah, but he's too small. Unfortunately, like I said, I got a world champion in boxing who said that, even though, Chocolatito was changing things. And you've got the example of Dana White, who better as an MMA spokesperson, that, he just doesn't really respect the lower weight classes among the men.
Yeah, and nevertheless, Mighty Mouse Johnson deserves our applause. He goes over there. He's now been the champion of UFC and the champion of one. He's been the champion everywhere he goes. He's larger than life in my book, and he's one of the greatest mixed martial arts competitors I've ever seen personally. But we're going to move on to people that are actually smaller than he is and of a different gender. We got Joanna Jacek comes back looking like a vintage version of her old self, completely outclassing the karate hottie Michelle Watterson in the main event of UFC Tampa last night. broke her foot at the end of the second round, apparently ballooned up real bad, still managed to go out there and put in a lot of volume for 5 rounds. And this was a devastating loss for the Karate Hottie, who was on a good run. Joanna, I think, potentially set herself up for a potential title fight. I think that's a conversation we need to have. I think a lot of that has to do with what's going on with Rose Namajunas. I don't expect them to give it to Tatiana Suarez. Jessica Andrade just got beat way too quick. But what's your initial thoughts on this? I thought this was the best performance I've seen of Joanna in quite a while.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign that, there's some people that have a peak and then they lose, and then, the losses start to add up and stuff like that. You wonder if they're going to bounce back, and they don't bounce back. Maybe they have a win here and they start, but they don't get back to that level. And with Joanne, this win gives you hope that she could get back into the title picture at 115 and be a player. You started to wonder about that. You had Rose there who, was clearly her foil, and then the move up in weight didn't go well. Moving back down in weight is not something that's easy to do, and she was going to need to be clear-headed and maybe, and perhaps at some point had a good slice of humble pie, where you get a little bit of that, hey, do I belong here? And then you answer like she did, which is, yeah, I do belong here. I think that the title match at 115 pounds among the ladies, with Wei Li winning the belt, is now, one of the most coveted fights in the UFC. And, Joanna probably moved herself to the front of the line here.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent in this the top 6 really of this division. You got Weili coming into yesterday. Weili was ranked as a champion, obviously, but Andrade was still ranked number 1. People forget that Joanna Jędrzejczyk completely outclassed Andrade and Jędrzejczyk's last title defense before she ran into Namajunas. And Namajunas was outclassing Jessica Andrade very badly before she got slammed on her neck earlier this year. But Namajunas came in ranked number 2. I still think Namajunas, if she wants the fight, I think it's hers. And I would support that because Namajunas was looking better than ever before, like as I said, against Andrade. And she technically does have 2 wins over Joanna. So if Rose wants it, which there's no indication she does at the moment, which is why I think they're going to lean toward Joanna. I think that it would be Rose's, but I don't think that would happen. Tatiana Suarez came in ranked number 3, who is still undefeated, but she was less than stellar, I would say, in her last fight against Nina Antarov, who's ranked number 4, who, so I think that they're still kind of in that mucky middle right now of their contenders, but they haven't really broke through into superstars who are going to get the fight. After that was Joanna, and now after this win in a main event setting with a lot of publicity on her, I think she leapfrogs everybody but potentially Rose. I think it's really because Andrade just got wiped out by Weili, lost the belt. Andrade isn't a media personality or anything. I think all this is going to come down to, does Rose want the fight? If not, I think we're going to see Weili and Joanna, which is what I think is going to end up happening probably early next year. My guess would be a co-main position behind. If they get the Khabib-Tony fight done, that could happen, or potentially the Israel Adesanya-Costa bout. I could see them co-maining against that because I think it'll be on a big card that will be a complement to an even bigger fight than that.
We'll see. I like it all. It's good stuff for the flyweight division, or, where are we? Are we in the flyweight division? 115 pounds. I think that's strawweight. The bottom line is if it was me doing the matchmaking, I think Joanna showed she's ready. Get her foot back together, and I think with Weili, you might be underestimating the UFC's Pavlovian dog type of response where they're drooling to get her back. And I could see her being asked to main event in China here relatively quick. And if that's the case, I would send Joanne into that fight. I think Joanne's the right girl, with her pedigree as a champion and stuff like that. And her attitude to go into a fight in hostile territory. I think you just asked Rose to do that. Rose, a very emotional fighter. It's time that you get back to Rose a little bit as a former champion as well. Maybe if Weili gets through Joanna, or you wind up with Joanna as the champion. You let Rose host the future match up there. Wei Li, should she hold on to the belt, is going to need, to obviously eventually leave China as well and do a few things like that. So I would do Joanna and Wei Li first, and then hope to get Wei Li and Rose somewhere in Vegas. Should Rose come back.
Yeah, I think that foot could. I mean, I agree with you. If they've got some China show lined up anytime soon, and Joanna can't make it, and Rose doesn't want to fight it, I would expect to see Tatiana get snuck in there somehow if they want to do this fight. If Whaley wants to fight quick sometime in like the near future, next 4 or 5 months, Joanna's unhealthy, Rose doesn't want to take the fight, Tatiana might squeeze in there. But I agree with you. I think the fight to make that the fans would be the most excited for would be between Whaley and Rose and Whaley and Joanna, but I think Joanna earned it. And there's really no indication of what Rose is doing right now. So, but moving on, fight of the night, without a doubt, turned out to be a slugfest that nobody, I don't think, really expected. Cub Swanson and Kron Gracie go the distance in a total back and forth classic. Kron Gracie, you can tell he's been training over there with Caesar and the Diaz brothers. Had a very Diaz-esque boxing style in the middle of those exchanges. Nevertheless, Cub Swanson, good footwork, attacked the body a lot, mixed up his striking, and really laid it on Kron, who apparently is superhuman, takes a lot of damage very well, was unable to really ever get this fight into a grappling scenario. But people forget that he's a baby in the game of mixed martial arts, and Cub Swanson's an old veteran who's been in there in the highest level of Zuffa for the past 12 years. So this was a big step up in competition for Kron Gracie, and he held himself with complete valor and respect. I was very entertained by the surprise and pleasantly surprised because I thought this was a big step up in competition for Kron. And he showed that he's transitioning to MMA very well. The one criticism I guess I would have is the same criticism I have with the Diaz brothers. There's just virtually no wrestling there. Their takedowns are not very good at all. And the Diaz brothers have always notoriously been able to get taken down pretty easily. But they've got great jiu-jitsu once they get there. And Kron struggled very badly to get this fight into a grappling scenario. But, man, he's tough as nails. And his boxing is very good because he stayed in there landing strike for strike with Cub Swanson for 3 rounds, which was very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you want to look at this fight. The spin I have on it is that the matchmaking was awful. I mean, the bottom line is what are you trying to do here? Was it to test Kron Gracie? Because if that was the case, then what you did was you picked wrong in Cub Swanson. Swanson was still going to be a notch above with his experience and stuff, even if you were sold that Gracie had done enough training and things like that. That's the bottom line is you got a guy in his 6th MMA fight in a co-feature spot, and that should never happen. It's just not the right place for it. If he had been in there against – because here's the problem with that. It's not so much the case in MMA, but if it is the case ever, it is with a guy like Kron Gracie. And that is, this is a guy that it was worth your while to try to keep undefeated. Mm-hmm. Messing up that, at his 5th fight, and, when he's 31 years old, you really made a boo-boo there. You really lost yourself a good opportunity there. And I think, you're right. The bottom line is he showed good things. The difference between Diaz and the Diaz style and what Kron showed, okay boxing, but the Diaz style with the pressurized boxing that they have, their intention with the pressure is for you to take them down because they don't give a shit about the takedown. They will work off their back. You would think that dichotomy also works with Kron Gracie. He wants to work off his back. Just get me to the ground. I'll work from my back. You on top, that's okay. But he doesn't have that type of chops with the boxing yet. So he doesn't apply that kind of pressure. He looked good at times, and against Cubby, he's fighting a guy with a lot of experience and stuff, but Cubby was able to adjust and made, the diversification gave Kron trouble. And he showed himself to be a fighter with less than half a dozen fights.
Yeah, and Cub Swanson wasn't the guy that was going to take him down either, and that was so the style matchup there played a factor there. This was a fight that was going to end up forcing Kron to either outbox Cub or to take the fight down, and Cub Swanson's footwork, just experience was just a little too much. So this was, like I said, I agree with you here. This was a gigantic leap from Alex Caceres to Cub Swanson. Even a deteriorated 4-fight losing streak, Cub Swanson. We ran through with Chad the other day. I ran through who his losses have been to over the past several years, and they've been to no chumps. They've been to good fighters. So, he Cub Swanson, as I said in our private messages last night, he might be a gatekeeper, but he's an entertaining and damn good gatekeeper nonetheless.
Yeah, like the bottom line is because of the strength of his opposition, that's where the matchmakers, maybe made a mistake in how much that drop off came for Cub Swanson. You know what I mean? Because he still looked serviceable to me, and a loss may have found him on the unemployment line, or knocking on Bellator's door.
Yeah, because once again, just to reiterate what I was saying there, I mean, Shane Burgos ranked like number 12 in the division. Hanano Moicano ranked in the top 15. Frankie freaking Edgar, Brian Ortega, top contender. Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar again, Ricardo Lamas years ago, back in 2011. And then Chad Mendez and Jose Aldo dating all the way back to 2009. Those are the only guys that have beat him. I mean, he's lost to very top guy. All of them are ranked guys, and some of them are like legends of the sport. So, this was a big step up in competition. Nonetheless, Kron held his own, showed he's tough. He took a lot of damage, but I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to get better. He's clearly improved his MMA game tremendously fast. So, and he's young still, and he's superior on the mat to just about anybody he's going to get in there against. So, I think we'll see him back soon. A sad fight, I thought. Nico Price is somebody that's been underrated for quite a while and has some of the coolest knockouts in history. James Vick moves up, makes his welterweight debut, looks physically better than I've ever seen him look. I thought that weight class suited him. Nevertheless, he's still just so stiff. And fourth loss in a row, some very violent knockouts. I think James Vick should hang it up after this. Nico Price, though, I think he's going to get some recognition finally after this. He was just coming off a bad loss to Jeff Neal, who I've been very high on in this stacked welterweight division. But earlier this year, remember his nasty knockout over Tim Means, and he got that knockout with a hammer fist from his back over Randy Brown not long ago. He's been back and forth, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. But Nico's one of those types that, I mean, he's exciting and he could knock you out. And I'm not sold on him getting a number next to his name yet or anything, but this is a big win. And James Vick, I think, is the better storyline here. I think this is it for James Vick. James Vick's taking some damage. He's not developing. He still has the same weaknesses. I mean, he got knocked out so bad by Gaethje, really bad by Hooker, and now this one's even worse. It looked like he had a broken jaw.
Yeah, this is a situation where, he's going to be suspended, obviously, and the suspension is going to be contingent on him being reviewed and being cleared by a medical doctor. But, like, for example, let's say he did break his jaw. Is it enough to just say, yeah, his jaw's okay now, and then he gets cleared to fight, Should more MRI, especially if he has a fresh MRI, those don't have to be renewed for several months or up to 3 years under some jurisdictions and stuff. Things like this, I think, the fighters are short a lot of medical attention. The bureaucracies around the commissions get them dealing with paperwork and things like that. But, the reason for this part of the conversation is because, I think James Vick has sent out a lot of flags about his neurological condition, from the stiffness in the ring down to the devastating knockouts and stuff. None of those can be looked at as a good sign.
I agree. And what's unbelievable before this 4-fight skid that he's had against Justin Gaethje, Paul Felder, Dan Hooker, and now Nico Price, he was 9-1 in the UFC. He was somebody that people were real. I mean, the fight with Justin Gaethje, at that time, he was coming in on a 4-fight win streak, 9-1 in the UFC, and that fight would have boosted him up into contendership at lightweight. And he got flatlined in the first round. And it's also important to know that one loss in his UFC tenure before that, when he was 9-1, was to Benel Dariush back in 2016, and he was not cold in that one too. So this is 4 knockouts that I can think of at the hands of Dariush, Gaethje, Hooker, and Price. And the other loss to Felder was a brutal fight. But these are 4 knockouts that he's literally been knocked cold in. James Vick, I think he should probably reevaluate where he's at in his career. Moving on from here, another Mackenzie Dern loses her O, and to the hands of Amanda Ribas. Mackenzie Dern comes into this fight, fights this fight about, I think, 4 months after she had her first child, and top prospect in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, came in undefeated down there at women's strawweight, has struggled making weight before in the past, makes it this time. But Amanda Ribas, young fighter, and she was very impressive in this fight. She was by far the crisper fighter. She never was threatened by a takedown by Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern definitely showed she's got some serious holes in her game. She was looping shots, just hoping one landed. Never found her shot. So big win for Amanda Ribas and a setback for Mackenzie Dern. I think Mackenzie Dern's a big girl. I think she can make 125 pounds. I think she should move up. But I think the comeback this soon after having a child was probably a mistake in hindsight, because she definitely took a long time off during the pregnancy and then had about 4 months of a training camp to come back. So I think that this was, in hindsight, probably not a good decision to take this fight so soon.
Yeah, she may be a little bit of a hype too. I mean, sometimes among the ladies, a lot of people get pinpointed fast and stuff, and for stardom and superstardom and stuff, or potential, and they quite haven't put in the work. And maybe matchmaking here, they could have been bringing her along more gently. But Rivas, I think they've got a good fighter there in Rivas, and we'll see how quickly she can become a factor. I think she'll make a lot of people look bad.
Yeah, she's only 26 years old too, and she's got a lot of the same good qualities. Like, apparently, she's a black belt also, and she looked like she was a very good athlete, very strong, powerful, had good footwork, and had some crisp striking. So I think Amanda Ribas is somebody as a Brazilian contender to keep your eye on down there at that strawweight division that is already by far the most loaded out of all the female divisions right now in the UFC. Final fight of the evening that I want to cover, Divas and Figueiredo on the prelims. And I meant to add the Thomas Gifford fight on this. That was just brutal and promotional malpractice on the part of his manager and the ref to not stop that fight sooner. He was taking a brutal beating, and they let that drag on way too far. And you can comment on that with this headline up. I don't care, Miguel, because I meant to get that on here, but that was sickening to watch. And we've talked a lot on here about protecting fighters, and that really was a bad beatdown, and then the knockout in the third round to just put the cherry on top of the cake was just even more brutal, and it was just hard to watch. But the reason I added this in the prelims, Divas and Figueiredo goes in there and chokes out Tim Elliott. They finally have a top 15 ranked again at flyweight. Figueiredo comes in ranked number 3 in the division, submits number 6, Tim Elliott. Figueiredo has already been called out by Joseph Benavidez. Benavidez basically made the call out to Henry Cejudo, but he said, basically, if you don't have any interest in fighting at flyweight again, just let me and Figueiredo fight for the vacant title. Just let it happen. And that's probably where they're going to end up going if Cejudo finally decides, go ahead and have the belt. I don't know what he's doing, what he's got going for him, but Figueiredo, there's not too many names at flyweight, and he's a top 5 guy, actually, at this weight class. So I think we should probably throw him some attention for winning this fight because he's potentially a number one contender now in this division.
I mean, here's a perfect example of a situation where this fight was buried on the card, and you've got more inexperienced fighters with much lesser ranking on top of the
Exactly.
card, and that's just a little bit of how the UFC doesn't give any love to the flyweight division. If you are presenting them like normal, then this fight should probably have been no worse than third from the top.
I agree.
And Figueiredo and Benavidez, let's hope they get that done and that we can move on quickly. And I've stated before, I'm not a Henry Cejudo fan. I'm not a fan of every time he opens his mouth, something stupid is going to come out of there and stuff. So, with that said, it would be a shame to let him hijack the flyweight division as well. Let him stay at 135. We know the move back. He doesn't really have to prove anything unless it's DJ. We know the move back to 125. He had trouble making 125 in the early part of his career. He's getting older. Throw him a bone, and then let Benavidez and Figueiredo figure out a fresh crop of flyweights and treat the weight division like it should.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good point, Miguel, about they bury this fight between a number 3 ranked guy and a number 6 ranked guy of an official division in the sport in the promotion, with pretty a wide open division right now with title ramifications on the line, and they just give it no press. It ends in a finish with a really good fighter. I mean, Figueiredo is a very good fighter.
Yeah, on a card where everything on the main card went to a decision, pretty much, and basically, like I said, the matchmaking is usually, the formula with the UFC, you know what you're going to get here. But this show, they had a couple of alarmingly bad matchups, including the Gifford fight where, Gifford's a good kid. He fights out of Arkansas. And, he trains, and I believe it may have been his father in the corner and stuff like that. If not, I worked with him on a boxing match. He's had a couple of boxing matches. He actually boxed on the Floyd Mayweather Conor McGregor undercard, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, he's a good kid, and he's a kid that is at the beginning or should be at the beginning of his career, and they should have been treating him as such. And here's a situation where what happened in the ring. Somebody's not assessing fighters, in a safe way. Maybe it was an aberration, but it definitely was cringeworthy, and not something that you want to see.
No, it wasn't, and it was brutal. But when I look at this flyweight division, man, they held on to it, but they're not promoting anybody on it, so I don't really know where it's going to go. Sergio Pettis is ranked, but yet he's a free agent and he's testing the waters elsewhere. I think they're going to end up. I still believe that these fighters will end up fighting either in Bellator or over in Asia. I just don't see the UFC investing in this division right now, and it's to me, it's crazy because they finally actually do have a super fight. Potential. If Mighty Mouse was still in the UFC, a fight with him and Cejudo, a trilogy fight, would be like a super fight right now. A gigantic monster super fight. But that's not possible anymore. So I don't really see what they have there at flyweight. I think they should get Cejudo out of there, let it clear the way, see what develops in the division. Maybe a new contender, a new face, a new star will emerge there. But we talked last time about Cejudo's right now. He's got murderer's row waiting for him at bantamweight. And
not to put Ben Askren down, but again, now you look back at the trade, and everybody want to talk about the trade and this, that, or the other stuff. Ben Askren is probably won about 5 seconds worth of his UFC fight time. Everything else, he's been getting either trounced or already knocked out in the fight and didn't even get started and stuff. And that's what you gave away for a guy that,
was arguably the greatest fighter we've ever seen.
made the call he was going to do it, get the guy to tap at the 24-minute 59 mark, and then did it. It's like, people are crazy. People are just crazy.
Yeah, nevertheless, it's a pretty good card. Good win for Joanna. Good weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. Props to DJ. I think he's the big star of the weekend. But good talking with you, Miguel. We'll get back Wednesday. We'll preview next weekend. We got Chris Weidman making his light heavyweight debut against surging young undefeated contender and Dominic Reyes. So we got that to talk about next week. And ultimately, everything right now is leading up to the big event beginning in November with the BMF title on the line between Masvidal and Diaz. So that's the next big one. But we got some intermediaries coming in between there. So talk to you soon. Talk to you in a couple days, Miguel.
Good catching up, Dev, and always fun there. We could mention Bellator, but we'll save that for another podcast as well.
All right, we'll talk soon.